Oh yeah, my name is Abel Martinez. I was a E5 in Vietnam, and I was in the 1st Cavalry Division, and we supported the 7th Cavalry, which was the native, like Custer unit, and several other units, and what else? I enlisted for 3 years. I was a 3-year man. And I didn't have a job. And, it wasn't a very popular war, but I said, what the heck with it, maybe I'll grow up in there. And I did. I went in for 3 years, but I got out in 18 months. When I got back from Vietnam, I did a year in Vietnam and 6 months here, and just all over the States. And then I went into the Army Reserve Military Police out of San Jose, Santa Clara. 20 years old. I turned 21 in Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
Well, I didn't really pay any attention. I just went. I know my parents, they didn't want me to go. I was just in a situation to where I could, I just didn't know no work. But I seen that opportunity, and I kind of liked the military, so I didn't want to join the Marines. They're too gung-ho. I didn't really want to be too gung-ho about it. But I took the second best, which is good. I think the Army is the first best, but everybody else says we're the second best because of the Marines. And I don't blame them. The Marines have a lot of hard work to do. Oh my God. Well, when I first got there, the first thing they did is line us up. And drill sergeant introduced themselves to us. And that's when I got my first round of push-ups, which I could barely do because I only weighed about 120 pounds at the time. And I could barely do 10. But I'll tell you one thing, when I got out of there, after all that, I was in Fort Order, was my training base. And there was nothing but sand, that deep. And we'd run through it, walk through it, crawl through it. So it was tough. I mean, when I finished up there, I think I was right when we were getting to the end of it. The drill sergeant said, "You're not going to make it, buddy. You're not strong enough." I said, "You want to bet?" So he said, "Go ahead and let's do it." And they tested me. When you first get there, they test you, make you go through all the obstacle courses and all that stuff. And I wasn't very good at it. But when I got out of there, well, I got my. I was not going to be recycled. It's called a recycle when you don't make it. So I made it through there, and then I got on my plane to my. Fort Ord was basic training, and then you have another series of training after that, which is called Advanced Tactical Training, AIT. And they sent me to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, the engineer school. And they taught me all the explosives and all the minesweeping stuff that you needed when you got over there. So then when I got out of there, I had 2 weeks, I think, here at home in San Jose, and then I went to Fort Lewis, Washington, and they sent me to the Philippines first. And then when I got over there, they said, "Well, you got to go, you're going to Vietnam." I said, "Oh, what else is new?" So they sent me to Vietnam, and it's all history after that. When I first got there, it was a kind of they put us in this place where they give you more Vietnam training, advanced Vietnam training, and it was for 2 weeks. So they showed us what the enemy looked like, what he wore, what their tactics were, and how pretty their girls are. And it was more like just a training, 2-week training course. Then after that, they sent us to our regular units. Well, it was more like a boost. When you first get there, they already know who's who already after they work with you a little bit, and then they just guide you in the right direction. And of course they're going to yell at you and everything else because you're not used to being ordered around, right? You're just not used to it. Ain't nobody going to order me around. But if you got to have some discipline if you're going to be in the military. That's just all there is to it. That's the bottom line. And of course you got to take your orders and everything when you're told to, and you have to know when to salute and when not to salute. And I mean, you don't have to go to the PX and salute everybody you see, and there are only certain people like officers, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I was in several, at different times I were in several different platoons. Mm-hmm. And depending on the time period, because they were already getting ready to, well, close to what they call it, close down, uh-huh, and start sending guys home. But I was there in 68 and 69, the second half of 68 and the first half of 69. And I was a combat engineer, and I did lots of mine sweeping, and what else did I do? Oh, I cleared out a lot of, I can't think right now, it must be the PTSD. Anyway, it was, what was I going to say? We did mine sweeping and a lot of demolition work. I did a lot of demolition work, mm-hmm, which is, like clearing jungle with demolition, with explosives, and a lot of bunker complexes, lots of bunker complexes. Mm. And then we went into Laos and Cambodia, and when we did, we sure got a good workout there. And got into some skirmishes. We did a lot of work, not a whole lot of combat work, but I did do some combat, working in combat because we supported the grunts. We call them grunts because they were infantry soldiers, and they usually had, like, for every infantry squad you had a couple of engineers with them, so they would like clear out or put up booby traps and stuff, and that's about what I did. And of course the jungle clearing, and I built a lot of fire bases too. That's where you keep that's where you work out of. Mm-hmm. You work out of a fire base, and they send you out into the jungle to look for the enemy, right? And support your grunts. And okay, I have the Vietnam service and the military service. And I got all the other little minor medals that they give you, except for the Bronze Star, which is the highest medal I received, and I received that for helping two of my buddies that were in one of the bunker complexes. They were down and they couldn't get out. They were caved in all around, and I had to go in there and get them out of there. They were both hurt, but and I'd have to walk down, like, well, it depends on how big your complex is. It could be a mile and a half of corridors and stuff that little caves that you have to walk through to get to the main part of it. And I went down in there and helped them out, just two of my buddies. And that's what I got the Bronze Star for. When you go through those bunker complexes, you have booby traps everywhere when you're walking through the little tunnels to get to the main part. They're all booby trapped. They have the punji pits, which is a pit full of bamboo slivers. Right, they're pointing up like this in a little hole, and you don't even know it's there. And when you walk through there, you got to be watched for that. Plus, you're looking for the enemy too, because you don't know what's around the next corner, right? And then you got to put up with bamboo vipers and scorpions, and everything you can think of.
Yeah.
Even elephants. I mean, you can't get an elephant inside the complex, but you can outside. You can run into. Then they had jaguars and every kind of cat you can think of. And of course, last but not least, Charlie Kong. And he was a very smart, shrewd, and very deadly. I was just happy to go home. I already did what I was going to do, and I learned a lot. And missed my buddies. Right, but they would go home like one before the other, like depending on when they got there. And you'd lose a friend every time. Probably once a month you'd lose a buddy, and a new one would take his place. Some what do call them, trainees. You get a new trainee in there, and then you'd have to show him yourself. You're part of the training thing. And especially when you're out in the field, and then you really start to train them, right? Because you're responsible for them. And I was an E5, so I was a bug sergeant, and I'd have to show them all the ropes out there, whatever it took. Like how to. In AIT, they show you the basics, but over there you have to know the right way to do it. Otherwise, you can blow yourself away, right? And not only that, but you can get shot or whatever. And so we had to show them. I even showed my second lieutenant. This guy is a second lieutenant from my AIT training, engineer training, here in the States. I got there 6 months before he did. And then here he comes along. 6 months later, he comes along and comes into my unit, right? And he was a nice little guy. I can't remember his name now. I think it was his second week there. We went out to the bunker complex, and that guy, he's the one that taught me, right? He taught me over there. We do it this way and do it that way. Anyway, we both got into this cave, right? We got into the cave. I said, I'm going to go first, okay? He said, no, that's all right, I'll go first. I said, okay. He was kind of hesitant there. I didn't want him to because I didn't really know. Anyway, he gets his 45 out, right? And he tapes a flashlight on it, right? He jumps in the hole, and this guy was like 6 foot tall, 300 pounds easy, or 275, something like that. And you know how thin that tunnel is? About that wide, and about this tall. Right? It was easy for me, but for him, he said, okay, he was gung ho, and he jumped into the hole, and he went up, moved into the hole a little bit, and then I jumped in, and I was in there right behind him. I couldn't see nothing because it was pitch black because he was blocking my way anyway. Anyway, we hit a bunch of bats. Man, they just started moving around inside that tunnel, and he seen them and said, oh wow. He was the first one out of that tunnel. I mean, he got by me. How did he do that? It's only about that wide, but he got through. And he went out and got out and he said, oh man, I should have listened to you. I said, man, that's just bats. Wait till you see the real thing. And he respected me after that, and he's the one that trained me. So. Yes, those are the ones you like. As soon as I got there, I found out who the real macho guys, and they were the very experienced guys, right? And these guys were usually E6, between E6 and second lieutenant, NCOs, non-commissioned officers, right? They're the ones with the experience, not the big shots. The ones that are down there in the nitty gritty, those are the ones you respect and listen to. And that's just like I was telling you about the second lieutenant. What happened? And I had this other, my squad leader, his name was Sergeant Lyons, Jimmy Lyons. And he had already been in combat there. He had 3 different tours before I went there, before I met him. So he was very experienced. Good old Sergeant Lyons. He taught me a lot. I learned a lot from him. He kept me alive and I kept him alive.
Combat?
Yes, I lost 3 of them.
3?
Yeah. And see, when you're in the jungle, you can't say that you killed anybody unless you're at hand-to-hand combat, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't know how many you killed because you're just shooting wild. You just want to get rid of them, right? Just get out of my way. And so you can't really tell how many of the enemy you killed either, you know. But some your buddies would, after like a little battle that you had, you'd see your buddies laying there or whatever, and wounded or dead, and we just help get them out. So we'd call in the choppers and we'd take them to where the chopper landed, the landing strip, or helipad pad, or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, we'd take them out there and load them up and send them back to the rear area.
Squad.
Well, you know, you have your little squabbles and stuff, but when it comes down to combat, you ain't gonna have no squabble at all. You're gonna back up your guy or get out, right? You have to. How are you gonna survive if you don't, right? And I went through a couple of those that everybody does, you know, little experiences here and there with them. Sometimes maybe you get in a fight with one of them or something over a beer or some mota. or some girl, right? So it's just only natural, right? But we had our fun too, and we had our good times and bad times. Most of it was bad, but yes, well, you also had, you know, when you're in a war like that, it's always in your mind that you could die the same day. So you didn't really make plans for the next day, right? You just waited for your orders and get going, and if you come back, you come back. If you don't, well, that's your own fault. Because most of the time, it is your fault if you get killed, right? If you're careful when you go in and you know how it works, you can survive. I did. Well, I didn't believe in killing, because I wasn't raised like that. My father was a minister. He raised me to love your neighbor and love your friends, whatever. To love everybody. But when you get into a situation like that, it's either you or him, right? I'm sorry, but that's the way it is.
Here.
Oh, every day. That's an everyday thing. Especially if you're, you know, going into an area that's highly concentrated with VC or whatever, Vietcong. And you don't know what to expect. I mean, you know the combat's going to come no matter what. Mm-hmm. And then you don't know the terrain very well because you haven't been in that certain area. You move around all over. And you don't really know the terrain. You know what the terrain is, it's jungle. But sometimes you can run into rice paddies and stuff, and you have different situations, combat situations. You're in the wide open or in the jungle. I'd rather be in the jungle because, you know, you can hide. Mm-hmm. And in the rice paddy, you're in the wide open. And there are booby traps everywhere out there. And you got little kids shooting at you. You can't shoot at a little kid, but if he's shooting at you, what can you do, right? Of course, I didn't kill no little kid now, don't get me wrong. But I've heard of situations like that when I was there. Mm-hmm. They say, watch out for the kids. Because there's some young ones, some really young ones there, girls and boys. Yes, I've seen them go off, and I've seen the stacks of bodies, right, that my mindset did to them. Mm-hmm. But the way I looked at it, it was just mines. I just put them out there, and I'm doing what I'm told. Whatever happens, I can't help it. Right, so I just went ahead and did my job. just like they're doing their job by coming at me or whatever, putting their booby traps and whatever they have to kill us, right? So, war is war. No.
No?
I wanted to go home. I wasn't really worried about it.
Yeah.
But getting to the place to where I'm going to go home is what you worry about at first, and depending on where you're at. Like me, they send me to Tanzania, and I cut my airplane from there to the Philippines and then home.
Okay.
But you know, when I got home to the airports, of course you're going to have the anti-Vietnam demonstrators there and everything. They'd spit on you and call you names. But I just kept on walking, got on the bus, and kept on going. I guess I would have done the same thing if I would have stayed and not joined the military. I probably would have done the same thing. But it's the military, and I had my orders. Well, I had 2 or 3 of maybe more than that. When I go into the bunker complexes, I didn't think I would come out of a lot of them because of the way they were set up. I mean, you know, like there's a booby trap every 10 feet. I mean, you have to be real careful, and it's dark. You know what I mean? And then a bunker complex like that, there's dead bodies in there, there's live bodies in there shooting at you, right? But you run into that kind of stuff in there. But that's when your buddies back you up, right? You're hoping your buddy backs you up because you can do the same thing for them. And it's hard for backup because remember I was telling you about the tunnel? It's only about that wide. How are they going to back you up? They're behind you. They're backing you up, all right. Anyway, you got a guy that does point and one that does tail, trail. And usually the point one is the one that warns the next guy behind him. And they're like maybe 10 feet apart. It tells the next guy behind him, something over here, there's a booby trap right here, tripwire, punji pit, snakes, or whatever. And he tells you, here it comes, you better be ready for it. And plus that, you're worrying about the enemy himself. You don't know where he's at. He could just pop out of the wall or something, cut your throat. So those are pretty memorable. And I used to clear jungle a lot too with explosives to make the fire base. And we'd blow trees every day. We'd blow up trees with a C4, I call it. And we'd blow trees up in the air, big old splinters from the tree would come raining down on you. So you'd have to be like in a bunker or something, because man, those splinters are big. And that was kind of spooky, especially if you're outside with no protection, you know. So that and setting up the mines, that's another thing. You gotta actually set the mines too, you know. Set them up and get them ready for whoever walks into them. Put your tripwires out and your claymores and all that. Claymore is a mine it faces you instead of under the ground. It's on top of the ground on legs. And it has like 200 ball bearings in it, big ball bearings, with C4 behind it. And sometimes the enemy would come out and turn it around on you, right? How do you think that feels? You find, oh man, look at this. It didn't go off, but it's aiming at us. Yeah, but that's another thing you gotta worry about when you're out there. This place they call Vung Tau on the coast for R&R. And then more trouble there with the girls than I did with the enemy. Never know what they're going to do either. I mean, they showed you. These girls can do this to you, and this their enemy, right? So you got to watch out for them too.
Again.
Oh, it was so good. It was beautiful. I loved it. I enjoyed it very much.
Right.
That's a little rough because you're not used to it, right? And you run into guys that, oh, look at this Vietnam. Oh, even at the Army Reserve Center. When I first got there, I was the only Vietnam vet in the whole place. The rest of them were all Army Reserve guys. Never been to war. I don't even think they even stopped a riot or helped an old man cross the street or anything. Anyway, you'd get like we'd line up for a picture, right? And we all line up for the picture. And put this guy over there. So they'd look at me, oh man, look at this guy. I had all my my ribbons and my medals and everything. I was the only one, right? They'd look at me, no, I had one little one like that, that's all they had. And they would be jealous, of course, you know, and they would start talking crap. And I'd just straighten them out and say, all right, good for you.
PTSD or?
Yes, I've had therapy for it.
Okay.
Yes. And they've done real good. They've really handled mine pretty good.
Mhm.
And a lot of the other guys I see or talk to, they're coming along pretty good too. Not all of them, but some of them. They test you a lot, you know, like your ears and stuff like that. And because sometimes your ears will trigger it because of the loud booms and stuff. Like right now I have a ringing in my ears. I've always had it since I got back from over there. But that'll activate it if you're not thinking about it, right? It could activate your PTSD. Mm-hmm. And some once in a while I'll hear a whole bunch of gunfire. I won't duck down anymore like I used to, but I do. You know. Anyway, that's
Okay.
life, I guess, for a Vietnam vet. Well, it was kind of it wasn't here or there, you know, it was kind of limbo-y like feeling. But as time went on, I got used to it. And I'd still think about the experience I had in Vietnam. And actually, the Army Reserve did help me a little bit, you know, with the way they would work us, you know, like we'd go like to Fort Ord and pick up drunks on the weekends or something like that, which was a lot easier in combat, unless he was some kind of a rowdy guy or something. I would, any little pop and I'd fall down on the ground or hide behind something. It's just like it's typical of more guys that have it. And that went on for a long time, years and years. Is there a jet coming over? Whoa. And then when I was over there, we had some airplanes that would fly over, you know, support airplanes. And they would drop what they call Agent Orange on the forest, you know, to defoliate, knock all the leaves off of it so they could see down to the ground better. Anyway, I was under there when they dropped it, right? So I have that. I have Agent Orange poisoning. But they're taking care of me now. VA is real good too. I've seen friendly. Yeah, well, I can't say that I didn't see it or experience it. I saw it a couple of times. I didn't really see it. There was more like talk, right? So mainly if you had like an officer that all the guys didn't like very much, he was always talking crap, you know. I said, "Whoa, man, I'm gonna frag that guy. He's gonna get fragged." That kind of stuff, but nothing really came of it. But as far as my family, they treat me good. I treat them good. At first, I didn't because of that, with the PTSD, and getting fights with my wife and stuff, mistreating everybody, my brother-in-laws and my whatever. And I wouldn't take no crap from anybody. Now I just brush it aside and just keep on going. I'm doing all right for my 70 years old now. I've lived a good life. But other than that, I did smoke some weed when I was over there. But sometimes, you know, if you don't have a good time, you're just going to be just there and no real purpose, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to party a little bit, make you feel better.
Or
It was mostly just pot. It wasn't like the heavy stuff, like the heroin and all that stuff.
Mhm.
You can't afford that. If you're in a combat unit, you can't afford that stuff. It's when the guys go back into the rear areas when they start doing all that stuff, and then eventually it grabs a hold of them. And when they do go back into a combat area, they're no good to nobody except get out of my way, or they just don't pay attention to orders or anything. Nobody's going to tell them what to do. And I got in a couple of fights with guys like that because I was the buck sergeant, and I was telling them, "Hey man, I haven't seen you in the company area for 2 months. Come on, let's go." They wouldn't go, so we got in a fight. Eventually, sometimes you could fight them and try to convince them to go, but they won't go. I had lots of friends that were. I had Cajuns. You know what a Cajun is, right?
Mhm.
They're from Louisiana.
Yeah.
A French guy from Louisiana, I should say. And Cajuns, I had lots of Hispanics. And some Indians, Native Americans, and some white guys. They were good white guys, so they were very friendly to me, anyway. Which they had to be, right? But and then I never seen any of them once I got out. I never saw them again. I would like to see Sergeant Lyons, though, because he helped me out a lot. He saved my life 2 or 3 times, and I did to him too. Yeah, most of the time they were just come out and give the orders, and then some of them were really good, would stay there though. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them would, the good ones. The one you had any respect for would stay right there with you. How are you going to gain any respect if he doesn't stay there with you? That's just like now they keep talking all that hate about they're including every Chinaman that ever lived. Vietnamese, Laotians, or Thais, Filipinos, whatever you want it. And that's not right. Because they helped us a lot over there, and we helped them. They've already been harassed by some of these other Anglo neighbors that are supposed to be so-called neighbors. But I told them, I got your back. That's what I told them. I'm not going to be. I'm going to help them because they helped me. Not them. These are the offspring are the ones that did help me. So that's good enough for me. So we get along good. I get along with all my neighbors. Try to anyway.